So you, in all this journey, you've made quite a. I've not thought about it in that light, but you've made I suppose, a fairly bold personal decision. It's probably been a costly one for you at times, and I know that because you've moved around and that's been difficult and tense. But you've made a decision to, as you rightly say, and you're not stupid, you're very intelligent. So you've made a decision to do something where you know the money and support is not in the best place for your career. So tell me about what's motivated you to stay in that space when you could do what so many other people have done, David? You could be doing the random control trial stuff and earning your millions and getting millions of publications and all the rest of it. So what's motivated you to stay in this commitment to help foster knowledge and understanding about recovery and support communities and all that sort of stuff? Yes.
The first thing is, probably not the answer you're wanting, but the first pure selfishness.
Okay.
I'm working in methadone maintenance clinics, inpatient detox wards, remarkably depressing and miserable. They're doing research in those places where, like, you have to come up with your £10 voucher to get people to talk to you, and the meter's running. 5 minutes later, I need to go. Somebody waiting for me. And, who knows about the credibility of a lot of what you get told. Or you're sticking drugs in people and you're doing things that really probably aren't particularly good or ethical. And then when I started, there used to be a conference called UKASAD. I don't know if you remember, a London-based conference run by Deirdre Boyd that now exists under a different title in London. And I asked her, not long after my encounter with William White, if we would be allowed to go along and give out a questionnaire asking people about their recovery journeys. And at that time, I was working with Ed Day in Birmingham. So you're absolutely right to point out I am incredibly itinerant. I think I'm now on my 12th university, either as a student or an academic. Anyway, and at the bottom, Ed and I debated this, we put down, look, if you'd like to talk to us more about your recovery journey, because there's 2 pages here we just gave out with the conference flyers, please contact us. And we were overwhelmed. And people wanted to tell their story. People wanted to take part. They were excited about the idea that the academic, obviously not everyone. And it just struck me, and ever since then, it struck me that doing recovery research and doing addiction research, one's not good for your health and the other is good for your health. And being surrounded by people who have made that transformation. And for me personally, several of my closest friends and people I most respect and admire are people in long-term recovery, because there's a kind of serenity, purpose about them that, most of us don't have. And so there's a very selfish motive. The other part of it was for me, I genuinely felt that I no longer could be part of that industrialization process. And it has been a very uncomfortable journey from, being one of Sir John Strang's proteges and on that particular pathway. At the time when I made a senior lecturer, I was the youngest senior lecturer at the Institute of Psychiatry. So that door was very much open, but, it just didn't sit right for me. And I didn't want anything more to do with it. And so and since that time, I have very much felt like an outsider. I have been an outsider, and I've been very fortunate that more often through working in criminology departments, I've been able to continue that work without...
And I find that interesting, because I wonder whether I'd have survived if it wasn't for the fact that I, first and foremost, are a social worker and have actually come from the social work and sociological perspective. Definitely not the psychology and the psychiatric perspective, and I do wonder if that is a place for other survival in a funny way
it's very much true. Now, I was fortunate twice after leaving. So twice I've worked in kind of medical settings. I worked with Ed Day in Birmingham as part of the medical school. But, within a medical school, we were so on the outside that nobody, I'm sure the head of the, in fact, I couldn't even tell you who the head of the medical school was at Birmingham. I don't think I ever met them. Peripheral and irrelevant, so we could do what we liked.
It's funny listening to you. It's very similar to reminding myself of listening to David Clarke, of course, you know, my co-producer in these films, who talks about his total rejection of neuroscience. All of a sudden, he realised he was doing this thing that was of no real value.
He was a turkey voting for Christmas. Well, I have felt much the same at times.
A turkey voting, that's a good one, yes.
And then the other time was when I moved to Australia, and
yes,
David did.
And you were in Melbourne? That's right, because David's in Perth, yes.
I was very fortunate to work for someone who is still a friend, who's a neuropsychiatrist, ironically enough, called Dan Lubman. But Dan Lubman is a wonderful and inspirational figure who is not a part of the traditional clinical orthodoxy and is very critical of how limited traditional treatment models are. You know, he would start by saying, well, our biggest problem is that nobody wants treatment, evidenced by the fact that it's typically 4 to 5 years after the onset of dependence before anyone turns up at our doors. This is not a good sign for how desirable we are to the world. And he was, as a kind of fellow outsider, he was happy to go for critical, challenging, innovative ways of thinking. So we had a wonderful kind of 24-hour telephone and online help service. So the idea that it was just this specialist clinical approach was ditched. You know, we developed this really nice 2 to 6 session alcohol-based intervention. We did lots of stuff that was really creative, and he helped me set up Recovery Academy Australia, allowed us to host it at Turning Point. It was a lovely model, but I think they are about personalities. It was escaping from the world of drug and alcohol, addiction services, medical departments, psychiatry departments. That's really given me, and I've been lucky that I've been a kind of an academic traveller who has found a few flags of convenience in homes, and to the extent I'm cynical about addiction treatment services, and especially about addiction science, I'm even more cynical about universities. So they really are flags of convenience for me now.
And they are, what was the word you used? They have become, you talked about industrialization. Well, it's a whole other thing that we probably don't need to talk to bore our recovery friends on here about, but they've also been down the same route of commercialization, businessization,
And so, well, you're as old as me, and you'll remember when universities were places that unique characters like John Davis were encouraged and allowed to flourish.